a certain time, or do you find there's an average of when the lights kind of comes on with a person? Do you get to a certain point that in an average, and again, maybe it's the wrong question to ask, but on average, do you find people are receptive to that, or do you find it takes a long time to get through all of that? Does that sound clear?
Yep, I understand what you're saying. So most of the people get to the place where they're open to doing insight work when they have some type of pain. And that's what we do, is we turn people's pain into purpose. But most people don't come in because they're just going along with life and oh, well, maybe I should go to counseling and get some insight. It's usually, or at least for the women, it's usually because they realize that they're in an abusive relationship, or for my women who are what we would consider are love addicted, will say that they know this person isn't good for them, but they can't leave them. And a normal, logical, sensible person can think to themselves and like, well, what does that mean? You know, someone is not good for you, but you can't leave them. And that's where their addictive pattern comes in, right? Because there's a certain programming or templating that comes into play. So usually people are coming to us when they're in pain. So 80% of consumers of counseling are women, or they are triggered by women. So it's either the husband that's coming in because my wife says I need to come to counseling or she's divorcing me, or the children are coming because the mom is bringing them, or the woman is coming herself. So 80% of consumers are women and that are coming in are usually in some type of pain, or their family is in pain, which is why they're coming. You know, the people that will come that are not necessarily not in pain are actually on the other end of the spectrum. They have the red rosy glasses on. We do premarital counseling. You know, I'm a Prepare and Rich provider. So we will do premarital counseling, and they're coming in because they want to either get a discount for their marriage license, or their parents said, in order for me to pay for your wedding, you need to do premarital counseling. But they're on the other end of the spectrum. So there's also a benefit to be able to be proactive in helping them balance out having a realistic relationship. So most people will come to counseling when they're in some type of pain, or they realize something that needs to be changed, or they feel stuck and they don't know how to get out of the cycle, but they're too ashamed there's too much shame that they're carrying to be able to express it to other people.
Well, that kind of leads into the second point, is acknowledge what needs to be changed. And so in the counseling sessions, or in talking with people, what do you use kind of as a blueprint to help them acknowledge the change?
Yep. So we are all licensed, and I'm a certified sex addiction therapist. I'm also an EMDR therapist. So what that means is, if you're not familiar with it, if you're listening, it's called eye movement desensitization reprocessing. We use that for veterans. It's an evidence-based modality where it's helping them look at negative charges in their life, like PTSD symptoms, those types of things. And we use the brain waves and those types of things to reprocess trauma. So we'll use different modalities, but the most important thing that we use when people are coming in and they're not aware of what needs to really be changed, they're coming in, they're thinking they're dealing with depression, but they really need to deal with something else, is we use a lot of assessments. So I'm a big believer in not just giving people my opinions, but helping their self-reports through assessments help them see the reality of whatever they're dealing with. So like, for example, if we're dealing with a female that has out of control sexual behavior, I use something that's evidence-based called the sexual dependency inventory. It's a self-report that she takes, and it puts her behaviors in behavioral categories, and it kind of breaks it up into to a certain type of report that I can reflect back to her. And when people see things in writing, especially in reports, there's something awakening about that. And many times versus just sitting with the counselor who's just telling them, well, it doesn't sound like that behavior is working for you. I mean, we're actually doing different types of assessments, and we're using different types of tools along with the motivational interview style to be able to help them see what needs to be changed. But we can't do that until that person has trust with us. So 80% of people continuing with counseling and staying with the process is having rapport with their therapist. And we know that. You know, that's just not my opinion. The research shows that. But also being a relational therapist, I understand that that's a strength of mine. It's a strength of a lot of the therapists that work in our practice. And and we practice the Christian faith. So we also know that being relational people is important, that you're loving people and you're accepting them, and acceptance and feeling safe, because we're looking at our counseling office as a holding space. So people need to be able to come into our holding space, and we are kind of like the scent eater, so to speak, is what I call it. We should be able to hold their emotions when they can't hold them for that time period while they're with us, so they're able to process them. Because sometimes when people are in it, especially when their pulse is going high and they're being triggered, they can't process emotions in those states. So we have to help them separate their behavior from who they are, so that they can process those emotions in particular, so that they can move forward. But going back to your question, when we're looking at addictions in particular, or self-sabotaging behaviors, there's something called Johara's window. Johara's window is looking at things that I can see in my client, but they can't see in themselves. And then we also have the least of that window, that they can't see it and I can't see it either, but it's also driving their behavior. So when we're looking at addictions, I think the research is somewhere between 80 to 90% is getting people out of denial. So once people can get out of denial and they can understand and see what needs to be changed, then the change can really occur. Because you can put people in certain positions, that are forced by family or forced by their spouse, that says you need to do this. Getting them in the right place is a good thing, or the right place with the right people, but that's not going to sustain or get them to have some type of change agent in their life. They have to get out of denial. So we use assessments, we'll use tools, we use motivational speaking, we use the rapport with the relationship, because you have to, in order to influence, and this is just life, it's not even in therapy, in order to influence other people, they have to trust you. You can even look at that in business, right? They got to trust, like you, or, or understand some level of being able to allow you to influence that process with them.
Well, that last statement that you made, I was just going to draw upon that, is that area of trust. And then just thinking back to when I first started at the Center of Hope, I was a Housing First coordinator. So I had clients that were assigned to me. And then what happened was the funding for that position ended. And so I ended up being an outreach coordinator. And that was based on who wanted to see you or not. And the other person, it was just a great coordinator. Everybody wanted to see her. I came on the scene and said, so when's Rosie back? And I thought, well, going to be a couple of days she's off. Okay, I'll wait for a while. But as people started to see you, and then there was one particular person that came up into my office. We spoke for, and at the end of it, apparently he started telling people, hey, the Steve Bryant's a person you could trust. So and so that kept building over the time. And trust is a huge issue, especially in what you're doing. But also coming into coaching is my client has got to trust me. I've got to show them a real interest in them. I've got to be a person of integrity, because they're giving me information that they're probably not going to give to anybody else. So trust, as you were mentioning, Janie, is a huge part of what you're doing, and what anybody's doing in any type of counseling or any type of coaching is that trust. One of the things I also, go ahead.
I was just saying absolutely, because it creates that safe, nurturing environment that's essential for them to build. So absolutely. Just reiterating what you said. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very, very much so. Then you talk about creating a plan or support to determine the changes to be made. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yep. So I believe that once people understand, okay, now I understand why I do the things that I do. I understand my patterns. I understand my own dysfunction, and that I'm reenacting or re-traumatizing myself based off of things in my history. Once we're able to see that, then we're able to take an inventory of real life and in the present day of what's working and not working. And the way that my brain works as a therapist is I like to have measurable goals. So I do the same thing with most of my clients. So once we decide, okay, based off of that information, this needs to be changed, and we come up with some immediate goals that they really need to work on to eliminate any type of anxiety or dysfunction in their life. And then we have long-term goals. And I like to set up with them things that they're doing along the way that are measurable to let them know that they're moving in the right direction. There's certain things that are in the gray area, but I'm a big believer in giving people a plan so that they're not just coming to counseling, because I've also been a consumer of counseling and I'm still a consumer of counseling if I need to be. So I know my worst experiences with going to counseling, whether it's been in church or whether it's been professional, is just feeling like I'm going someplace and I can have the same conversation with my girlfriend in Starbucks. I'm just going and I'm just unloading and there's no plan. If I'm using a service, I like to have a plan. I like to kind of know where I'm going. So I kind of have the same mindset along with the relational aspect with my clients. So once I got a good understanding with them, I like to have a collaborative plan with them. I don't want to tell them that this is what I feel you need to do. I will tell them that based off of these goals, this is what I know to be most effective. What do you think about that? What do you feel will be the barriers to us working on this? What do you feel like would be your strengths with this? Whatever that may be. And I can't at this point with everyone, but I used to actually do a written summary or a follow-up email with all my clients. This is a recap of our session. This is what you've agreed to. This is what I've agreed to. You're gonna read chapter 2 by next session, whatever that may be. So there's accountability. There's something that they have that's tangible that they can be doing, because I believe also counseling is like the gas station. They can come here, they can get insight, they can feel better, but they have to go back to their family. They have to go back to their job. They have to go back on the road, so to speak. So they have to be able to have certain things that are going to keep them going. That's really going to be the meat of their life change in between sessions. So I don't believe in just talk therapy. I think if we were able just to talk out our problems, we would be a different world. People have to work, half of it is insight. The other part is we have to work through the things. We got to do things. The same thing with grief. I tell people, we hear that myth all the time, that time heals all things. I don't believe that. Time is part of it. Time is part of it, but what are you going to do with that time? There's two parallel approaches there. And it's the same thing in therapy. Just coming here and talking about it isn't going to change it. It's going to be, okay, let's create a plan of what we're going to do to start changing it and to make it realistic to your life. That's going to be measurable. That's going to not disrupt the apple cart. It's not going to cause you more suffering, but we have to be able to start moving in the direction of this goal that you've set. And it doesn't mean that you have to be there tomorrow, but it means that we have to keep moving forward. And it could be slower. Some people move faster, some people move slower. It all depends on their personality, but we just have to keep moving. Is that plan?
Mm. In your opinion, Janie, do you find most counselors do set up an accountability plan with their patients?
In my opinion, absolutely not. I have more clients than not than I would like to have to even say that when about time they get to me or get to our center, they've gone through so many different counselors or even pastors that they're still stuck, I should say. They're still stuck. And, we are, especially here in Central Florida where I'm located, we have 8 graduate school programs that have mental health or marriage and family or social work. So we are flooded with therapists and counselors. And I think one of the things that I would like to see, and I'm actually on a board of Palm Beach Atlantic University, it's a Christian university here on a board. And I like to be able to influence that if people are in the helping profession, that they also are accountable to doing their own work before they're let out of graduate school. Before they're let out of graduate school, a requirement is that, because not all graduate programs, believe it or not, do that, but require them to have their own counseling, to do their own work, which I feel was a blessing when I did my CSAT, with Patrick Carnes, to get my certified sex addiction therapist, is that there was a parallel approach, and it was a long approach. It was an investment and a lot of money, but we had to do our work along with them teaching us the techniques and skills and the tools and all the stuff that they were giving us to do the most evidence-based, research-based work with our clients. But they held us accountable to doing our own work, and it was hard and it was difficult. When I look back, it was so worth it to have that accountability, to make sure, okay, if you're going to get Patrick Carnes, guru of sex addiction, he wrote Out of the Shadows, many other books, Trauma Bond, but he's like, if you're going to be getting my certification, I want to know that I have some level of trust and I know that you've done your work. So they built that a part of their program. And I think it's one of the phenomenal, not necessarily has to be about being a CSAT, but about the program of building and holding people accountable. If you're going to be using my certification and my name to go out there and be a helper and a healer, that I have some level of confidence that you've done your own work. So I believe there needs to be more accountability. With that, unfortunately, in my field, I had a couple of situations where I had to report other, because we're state mandated reporters as well. So I had to report other therapists who had inappropriate relationships with their clients and those types of things. And it's a hard place